In this video, we'll look at BMAT 2020, Section 2, Question 1. So, we're asked which of the statements about genetic variation are correct. So let's start with the first one. Asexual reproduction always produces genetic variation. Now, can we think of an example of asexual reproduction that may or may not follow this rule? I think probably the most common example is going to be binary fission. And we know that binary fission doesn't really produce genetic variation because the DNA is replicated exactly and then the cell divides, so it produces the genetic identical. So we know that this statement is false. Moving on to the second statement. Gamete production is the only source of genetic variation in sexual reproduction. So for this statement, have a think about what happens before and after gamete production and whether that can produce any genetic variation. And we see that it actually can. So afterwards, we've got independent assortment and crossing over of the chromosomes ready to divide into new cells. That in itself can cause genetic variation, as the chromosomes may not align identically in each cell and can cross over and swap some genetic material. And also we get random fertilization, so not every egg and sperm are the same and are going to randomly fertilize whichever one meets it one in the time period. And that again is the source of genetic variation. Nextly, our statement is the environment causes genetic variation. Now, can we think of a way that the environment can interact with our body and our DNA? Well, there are a couple of ways it can do that. Firstly, I would like to point out that the UV radiation from sunlight can actually damage our DNA and cause mutations which can cause that genetic variation. And also there are things like carcinogens, mutagens we find in the environment, like asbestos, which can damage the DNA, again causing that genetic variation. So we know that this one is true. And lastly, our last statement, mutations can produce genetic variation. Well, what do mutations do to our genes? They're going to change the DNA. Mutations, of course, change to the genes, and therefore we have genetic variation. So that one is true as well. So out of our 4 statements, we know only 3 and 4 are correct, and therefore our answer is F.